Welcome everybody. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds just to allow everyone some time to jump in. And with that, while we're waiting, I just ask that if you can, please make sure that both your first and last name are listed in the participant list. You can click on your name and go to more and rename yourself, especially if your name is Mike. It's hard for me to figure out who you are, but if you are looking for those continuing education credits, it's very helpful that I have first and last names in the participant list. And with that, I am going to introduce Ben Marnick with Centria. Centria is the sponsor of this session, Radical Technology in the Age of COVID-19. And with that, Ben, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Karen. So welcome everybody to AIA Build Pittsburgh and Radical Technology in the Age of COVID-19. My name is Ben Marnick, and I am the local district sales manager for Centria Architectural Systems. Centria is proud to continue its history of support for AIA Build Pittsburgh this year as a session sponsor. Centria's partnership with AIA Pittsburgh and chapter members has been a tremendous benefit to us, to me personally, and certainly I hope for you and your respective firms as well. For those of you that may not be familiar with Centria, we are a manufacturer of metal enclosure solutions for the architectural, commercial, industrial, building design and construction markets. In addition to the manufacture of metal wall and roof panel systems, Centria offers support to building owners, architects, contractors during all phases of a building project, including product selection, application, budgeting, detailing, specification assistance, anywhere from those early schematic, early proposal stages of a project all the way through the final stages of building construction or construction administration. So I just want to take the time, and Centria wants to take the time to thank AIA Pittsburgh for another opportunity to participate as a sponsor for AIA Build Pittsburgh, and to thank you, the members of AIA Pittsburgh, for your continued support of Centria Materials in the design and specification of your building projects. So with that being said, thank you very much for your time and enjoy your session.
All right, let's see if this will share. Am I up?
You are up.
Okay, that's amazing. Modern technology. All right. So let me see if this will get to the full screen. Okay. Good morning. My name is Dan Briggs. I work for a company that has manufactured some of these new designs. So we're going to go over one of the things that's kind of a topic in the news, which of course is indoor air quality in buildings ranging from your home to your school to your hospital to whatever your purpose may be. Everyone is a little bit aware these days, more aware of the need to maintain indoor air quality. So the theme here is excellence in design, and I'm going to talk this morning about a bunch of products that perhaps many of you have heard of on the periphery, but have been bombarded with manufacturers' claims, including companies like my own. I hope this morning what I'm going to do is outline the commonality of most of these technologies, how they're the same and how they're different. The easiest way to describe this is all of these reactions we're going to talk about require energy, and where the reaction takes place is the main difference, because nearly all of them create free radicals, which is a family of chemicals that are responsible for oxidation reduction reactions that keep us alive. So with that being said, there's a commonality here throughout this. Feel free to ask questions. I'm not sure how we're going to go about that, but questions are always welcome. So on that high note, we'll start out. Here are the kind sponsors who have helped put this presentation together for AIA. We thank them all. This is a continuing education class, and it is about oxidative technology. And oxidative technologies basically are those technologies that create chemicals that fall in the category of free radicals. That's the general category. There are two broad categories. One are reactive oxygen species. The other are reactive nitrogen species. And within that, there are a number of other chemicals that can be created, but free radicals are either going to be an ROS, which is oxygen, or an RNS, which is nitrogen, but you have a radical that's formed, so they're extremely reactive. Why now? The reason now is because the market's inundated with all of these technologies, and every one of them has a marketing story to tell. And you in the architectural community have to decide which of our stories you want to believe and which you don't. But I will say that the basis of sound decision making probably goes into how valid were the tests, and we'll get into that as we go. But testing matters, and some of the papers that have come out from ASHRAE, some of the things that are in the news about school districts that have bought a number of the ionizer type problems are in lawsuits right now. So it's really timely. The demand is there, products are there, but a lot of these products, most of us don't know that much about. We do want to try to improve it. I'm quoting from one of the many articles that have come out that are somewhat negative about the particular oxidative technologies called ionizers. One of the things you need to be aware of, and I'd rather you do your own homework than me speak pro or con. Studies have started to be done in China, however, that are on the internet and they're open. And they came out in 2020 where they stopped looking at the chemistry in these products and they started looking at the unintended consequence health-wise with school children. So those papers are available through some of the members in your association, I'm sure. If not, we can give you a link, but we won't comment on those links. We'll simply provide them where you can read them. The process itself on all these technologies, from ionizers to photohydroionizers to photocatalytic products, every one of them works exactly the same way. The differences is, are they providing energy or are they providing the end free radical? In other words, if you're a photocatalytic manufacturer, you actually have the reaction occur within your device. It doesn't go out into the occupied space. If you're doing an ionizer or a photohydroionizer, oftentimes you flood the space with energy, then the energy reacts with water vapor. But in all cases, they're producing a free radical. Something has to be the mechanism that destroys contaminants. In every instance, it's a free radical. The process of the destruction itself is oxidation reduction reaction. Those of you who are organic chemists, you know more about that than I do. But I'm quite aware that when you energize a noble metal, an electron migrates from the inner band to the outer band. So you have an electron hole on the inner band, which is reactive. Then with that extra electron you just bumped out to the outer band, it takes water vapor and it breaks one of the hydrogens off and it becomes H plus OH with a dot, which means it's a radical, and that radical is really reactive. So it's a two-part reaction on all of these various technologies. It's important to remember oxidation, reduction. Second thing to remember is, what is the energy source? Third thing is, which free radical are any of these technologies creating? And last, where are they creating it? So there are a number of issues that have started to come up, and I thought I would bring them up simply because there's some pretty outstanding groups that are starting to do the white papers. But the role of oxygen and free radicals in occupational and environmental lung diseases, the reason I read that is because that particular paper was done by an association that's part of the University of West Virginia or West Virginia University. But lungs are available for reactions. That's how we live. We have internal sources of these free radical reactions, and we have external sources. All of us that work in the industry of creating free radicals that are an external source need to be aware that human bodies have just a certain number of antioxidants, and we're creating something that's an oxidant. So be aware the late night commercials are not just marketing. When you overwhelm your body with something that starts a fire in effect, which is what a free radical does, you have to have a fire department, and your body has a fire department. It's called a free radical. That is the fire. The fire department is called an antioxidant. So for any of you who have any questions about that, there's some pretty good papers, but oxidative defenses can be overwhelmed when you create an external source of free radicals in an occupied space. In an unoccupied space, it really doesn't matter. Blast away. But where people are there, remember, there is a health concern. What we know is that free radicals, collectively called reactive oxygen species, can do cell damage. So where they are created does matter. The other thing that the slide doesn't say, it's not just reactive oxygen. Some of the devices create reactive nitrogen. So when you see your presentation from any of us that are vendors, be aware if we're creating a free radical, it's either going to be an ROS or an RNS. I know I keep repeating that, but I think takes about 16 times, and then the average person becomes part of their database. So one of the things we want to make sure of is that we don't overwhelm natural defenses. So where the reaction is occurring matters. It's natural and it's normal in metabolism, but not when you create an external source that overloads the fire department in effect. So be concerned about imbalances. When any of us claim that it's natural, it would be in your best interest to find out what the natural occurring rate is. For example, many of us that produce an ionizer talk about the fact that it smells like an ocean or the forest. The fact of the matter is those particular places, oceans and forests, do produce naturally occurring ions, but at a level from 200 to, at the most in a thunderstorm, 5,000 per cubic liter. And the devices that are being sold on the market by their own admission can produce upwards of 13,000 ions per cubic liter, which is not a natural amount. So be aware when you look at any of our claims, know for yourself what a naturally occurring number of ions would be. And you can Google that. You can get that in about 3 minutes. It's pretty simple. You also need to be aware that in China, the papers that have come out, they do a number of ionization types of products. It's not any one manufacturer, but what they found in 2 papers that have been produced in 2010 is there has been an effect on the autonomic nervous system in some individuals, and they're testing school children. They also have found the physiological indicators of oxidative stress, which goes back to the balance. Some of these machines can overwhelm that balance. So that being said, the reason that I spent a little bit of time on this is there are lawsuits that are in the news right now happening to a number of manufacturers in Maryland, in New Jersey, out in California. You just can do your own research on that, but it's pretty easy to Google and find. It's not that they don't work, it's do you need people to be there in the room with them when they are working. Here's some types. So any of the manufacturers that come to you and say, we produce, and there's a following list, be aware every one of those things has a half-life. So if it's something that's being created in a location and it has a half-life of less than a billionth of a second, probably not going to migrate out into the space because no airflow through a piece of equipment is moving faster than a particle that comes and goes at 1/9 to the -10, or 1/10 to the -9. Sorry. So there's a list. This is on the slide, and I think that your organization will have a copy of this presentation. And so if you're interested in it, and you can take off from here, if you find these papers, you can go right on down all of the other papers they reference. So occupied space concern. Is the reaction random? Is it just happening in the space and it's not discrete? And it has no first pass efficacy. In other words, when you're looking at the test results, was it a single pass test and was it done at typical air conditioning speeds, which inside an air handler on a big unit would be between 300 and 500 feet per minute. So if the testing was not done at a typical air conditioning rate, just something for you to be aware of. Now, where does the reaction occur? If you flood the space with energy, then it occurs randomly anywhere in the space that you're flooding. If you're using a type of technology, though, that only creates hydroxyl radicals, which are OH with a dot, I'll go back. I don't know if you can see that. It's this one, this OH with the dot, the hydroxyl radical, or what photocatalysts produce. But there are other products that produce just a little bit of all of these things depending on the technology, and you'll have to see what that manufacturer says they're producing. Okay, so you've got a random reaction. It's non-discrete, has no first pass efficacy on some of the products that just flood the space with ions, but be aware, because it is random, it can probably do some good on cleaning surfaces, which PCO or other technologies that don't leave their device cannot do. The reaction only occurs in their device. So if you're trying to clean a bunch of potatoes in a potato warehouse, there are some of these ionization and ozonator technologies that would work real well, cleaning bacteria and mold off of your fruit. But you've got to be aware that the people in there are also breathing the same thing that is doing the reaction on your fruit. So random reaction, non-discrete location, can be anywhere. Little or no first pass efficacy. Nearly every one of the technologies that we'll look at this morning require a certain amount of time to get to a level where they, by their claims, they start to kill. Then there's another group that has a controlled reaction, such as a photocatalyst, does have first pass efficacy, and that varies by design of the product. They're probably at least 4 to 6, depending on what do you want to call the product. Photocatalyst on the market right now, most of them use the same design, which is a honeycomb. There are others that do not, and some of those are patented. So we won't get into an awful lot about that this morning. Just be aware, simply because somebody comes to you with photohydroionizers or a plasma unit or hydrogen peroxide or photocatalyst, all of them are not the same. If they're in the same category, the manufacturer may go take it to market and do some little things that make it better or make it worse. So be aware of that. But all of them produce a reactive oxygen species. You have to have something that causes the reaction to occur. And as I said, some of them are indiscriminate. It's just chemistry. It's not marketing. When you put the energy out there and you have the water vapor for it to react with, it's pretty easy to create hydroxyl radicals anywhere in the space. If you have certain products, though, you treat your matrix that's in the airstream with noble metal, and then when you bombard it with photons from UV light, which is the energy source of many of the photocatalysts, the photons actually cause the crystals to create the hydroxyl radicals by the migration of electrons. So 2 different ways to approach it. One, fill the space with energy. The other, fill a controlled chamber with the free radicals rather than have them happen out in space. All right, so here's the name of some of the technologies you're going to look at. All of them ultimately create free radicals. Bipolar or cold plasma. There's a thing called photohydroionization, which throws energy out into the space, but it also creates some stable free radicals, or either reactive oxygen or reactive nitrogen species. It's going to vary from brand to brand. There are purified hydrogen peroxide gas products out there. I don't know an awful lot about those. When you look on the internet and you Google something like dry hydrogen, you can't find it. It seems to be a marketing rather than a educational term. So I don't think it comes out of that particular type of product. While I know it could be very effective, be aware though that the name dry hydrogen is hard to Google and find. But there is a hydrogen peroxide gas apparently that they're claiming to do. Okay, last thing is photocatalytic oxidation. And that's basically some type of matrix, whether it's a honeycomb, something that looks like a 6-inch pleated filter, or something that basically looks like a little thin filter that's painted white and put across an airstream. Those are all photocatalysts. When the lamp that's shining onto them is energized, they create the free radical there in the panel. Hydrogen peroxide gas throws what they're creating out into the space, and the reactions occur randomly. And I'm not really sure what their claim are, is what level you have to have it at before it occurs. Photohydroionization, as I said, does two things. Some of the benefit occurs right in the device. They're creating hydroxyl radicals right there in the device, but they're also throwing energy out into the space, and some of them are creating stable free radicals. And last but not least, as I go back over the list, probably the most popular and the one that's causing the most controversy right now as far as in the news are bipolar and cold plasma. And again, you can take all of these things and Google them on the internet, but the primary uses are to clean the air and clean the surfaces. One of the situations you've all found yourself in lately is when you talk to end users and when you're talking with your own team, what's your goal ultimately in the space? If you're trying to clean just the surfaces, do you want people in the room or not have people in the room while you're cleaning them? You want to clean the air. Is it better to clean the air using the movement of the air conditioning systems, or should you use a small standalone unit that just does the space? There are papers that present it from both sides. I would tend to lean towards, in school classrooms in particular, you design the device to meet the room space. If you want to do this, and I know as architects, you do things very professionally, you can get a company that can go do an airflow study in a school classroom, in any type of a school. We've used them before, where we know where to place our standalone machines. So there's some things and steps you can take if you want to ensure air quality. You need to know whether you're trying to clean the air, clean the surfaces, or clean both. And if you're cleaning the surfaces, if it's killing biologics on surface, is it safe to have people occupying the space? Next item on this would be TVOC control. That's total volatile organic compound control. I know there are PCO units in numbers of airports. Apparently there's some ionizers as well. So I think you're going to get a variety of responses from the end users, but you can control VOCs. I know with a PCO product that our company manufactures, we've done a number of hospitals and airports and places to deal with organic odor associated with cigarette smoke or environmental tobacco smoke. So those were perhaps the traditional methods, but now we're getting really worried about cleaning a virus out of the air. So be aware of all the tests that any manufacturer has to do. One of the most difficult is to tell what kind of reaction or action you're getting with a virus because it's really difficult to collect them. Uh, I know that some companies have used third-party commercial labs. They have had some odd-looking testing devices simply because of the difficulty in getting COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. It's tough to get a concentration that you can check in a single pass or even in a room. So be aware, the surface biologic cleaning, you can do testing for. It's a little more difficult with the virus. TVOC control, it's pretty easy to do a single pass test. And then a number of these products have gone in using IAQ procedure, which ASHRAE has revised lately a couple of times to make it a little more difficult to use ASHRAE 62.1. Your third-party testing, they've kind of tightened up the rules on that, which should be. So be aware, some companies will say we can keep the air just as clean as the outdoor air. You need to have third-party testing that shows that. It's easy to do TVOC reduction, single pass reduction, using an ASHRAE 52.2 device or having a clean air delivery rate done in a lab that can do VOC testing or chamber test. And last but not least, it's tough to see if the air is actually cleaned of a virus, but there are devices where you can do it. It's fairly expensive, and surfaces are pretty easy to tell whether or not you've killed a biologic or not. So your stickers here on these three uses of these products are, is the air in a room clean of biologics? You're going to have to take special care with viruses because they're difficult to collect and they're difficult to determine whether they're viable or not. So it's got to be a good lab, which means it's expensive. TVOC control is pretty easy. You can get an inexpensive meter and do in and out testing with that. Energy reduction should require anyone that's an architect with your associated engineering firms. Energy reductions that ASHRAE standard has now started to require some real test results. And I would certainly encourage you to follow the ASHRAE guidelines there in section 62. Considerations when you look at any of these devices is how are they designed, how long is the reaction, and where is the reaction. Once again, the length of the reaction is important because some of these free radicals are stable and they'll stay in the air for days. And you may not want that to stay in the air for days. You may want it to happen quickly. So the considerations are the design of the product. In other words, does it go in your HVAC system? Is it a standalone unit? Is it a combination? Does it fill an area with energy and have random reactions? Or does it control where the reaction takes place? And what's its energy source? And then duration and location. Location is rather important because you've got to decide whether you want it in an occupied or an unoccupied application. Here's a little bit of food for thought about the technologies. The difference between things like the photocatalyst and the ionizers are basically the difference between a fogger and a bug zapper. So a nice little analogy would be, I have my backyard full of mosquitoes. I want my kids to go back there and play. I need to get something to help control the bugs in my backyard. I can get a fogger, but it's been wet and raining and there are tons of mosquitoes. So for my kids to go out there, I got to keep the fogger running, but I got my kids playing in the fog. Or I can get a bug zapper and I can attract the bugs to me and I can kill them when I attract them. So the ones that are like the fogger that just blanket a space with energy, with random reactions occurring, are things like bipolar cold plasma and photohydroionization, though to be fair with that particular product, some of it occurs out in space where you've thrown energy, and some of it occurs in the device. The purified hydrogen peroxide gas or dry hydrogen, once again, fills the space. You can look at their patent for that product and find out it does a really good job of killing things. It even kills bugs over time. But again, you have to decide whether you want people in there. Although all of the manufacturers of these products claim that they're safe, apparently it looks like that's going to be settled in courtrooms. PCO is a little bit different in that PCO creates hydroxyl radicals. Hydroxyl radicals have a half-life of a billionth of a second. So if you create it in a panel, in an airstream, you can at least control where that reaction occurs, and you can strengthen or lessen the reaction based on the design of your photocatalyst. So to summarize, many of these products are like a fogger. You fill the space with energy or with stable free radicals. And some of these devices are like a bug zapper. You have to bring the contaminant to it, and it kills it where you brought it to, where you brought the contaminant. So here's some quotes from some ionizer companies. I neither promote or detract from these statements, but I'll let them speak for themselves. One company says that the plasma form hydroxyls, nature's detergent, and that picture up here in the upper right shows the creation of hydroxyl radicals out in the occupied space that kill either virus, bacteria, or mold, but they work right here on the space next to this guy's elbow, but they're also doing something in his lungs. And I'll let you guys look at the medical people. You decide for yourself what you want. Here's information from another ionizer company, which again shows the creation of hydroxyl radicals. So the energy source is the ions that are created by the devices that both these companies manufacture. The location is out in the space where the people are. And one of the drawbacks is, by their own admission, you need to fill the space with energy for the reactions to start occurring. But some of the companies have a device that'll limit the amount of energy that can be created. Some of the companies don't. Third-party testing has had, as I mentioned, some really, really high rates of creation of ions that have gone through the test chambers that don't reflect reality. So you need to be careful when you look at third party from any of these particular technologies, and make sure you know what the energy is, where the energy is created, how much of it is pumped into the space, how much does it take for the reaction to start, and do I have to have single pass efficacy, or can I just let it work over time? And with a virus right now that has a life expectancy, the last paper I saw from NIH had about 2.5 hours in the air and up to several days on surfaces. So we've got a bug that everybody is concerned about that can live in the air, can live on surfaces. So your challenge is how you deal with it in both places. Photohydroionizers are a lot of little devices that look something like this that go in the ductwork. They broadcast a few free radicals out into the space. Some of them are reactive nitrogen, some are reactive oxygen. You'll have to look at that from brand to brand. Over time, they also create energy like ionizers that goes out into the space, and it reacts with things like water vapor out there, and again creates free radicals randomly in the space. They can break down the VOCs because VOC breakdown with free radicals varies depending upon the molecular weight. You never really know when you're doing it out in the space. When you break a VOC down, you don't know what it becomes. Ultimately, all of these technologies are trying to get it back to water vapor and carbon dioxide, but depending upon the design, you probably look at the test results, because you don't really want something that takes the exhaust off of an aircraft and turns it into something that's even meaner. So be aware and make sure that any of the manufacturers actually have taken air samples after their equipment has worked in various real spaces. For example, it's really easy to do that in an airport if these things are going. You can do in and out testing to see what's been created. It costs money, but it may be worth that for peace of mind. And few of these photohydroionizer type products make any claims about single pass efficacy. So the ionizer, you're not really sure what it's doing in the space immediately, but over time you can get a test result. Photohydroionizers do something immediately as the air passes through that little device, but they also throw energy out into the space to create free radicals randomly. Then we come to the purified hydrogen peroxide gas generator. This is a device that takes hydrogen peroxide, dries it out, and is supposed to create a safe limit out in the room. You can look at all of the patent information on this. They do not report single pass efficacy. So if you have something you're worried about killing quickly or in a single pass, you might consider just look at what the manufacturers claim and see if it's something acceptable from you. But once again, you're using energy. You've got a lamp. Their DHP panel produces their dry hydrogen when the energy strikes it. And then over time, by test results, they reduce VOCs, microbials, they kill fleas, lice, ticks, and bed bugs out in the space. So there's definitely something going on there according to their third-party testing. The thing that's the unknown is whenever you create any kind of free radical in a space, what's the effect on humans? This may have no effect whatsoever, but you're going to have to look at the third-party papers for yourself. PCO is something that I've been associated for 20 years, and it has changed from the original devices that were done at Sandia Lab by the Department of Defense for space stations. Basically, the way these things work, you have a matrix, and this particular one, it's the stuff that looks like filter material. And these little green circles are attached to, you can see lights going down through it. So when the lights come on, that white filter material is coated with titanium, the energy creates it, and the location of the reaction is right there in the panel. The length of time the reaction occurs is about 1/billionth of a second. So the reaction occurs in the panel from the energy striking the coating on that, creating a hydroxyl radical. Now, some problems with this technology. You've got to have the contaminant come to the panel. So you really have to decide, do you want a global or at the source solution with this? Because it does not go out into the space and scavenge. These have been extensively used in hospitals, casinos, cannabis grow facilities. If you're designing those, it's a great application for this type of product, and airports. So many of these PCO products have been on the market for 20 years and probably have some decent white papers for you. But just to hit the highlights, you can do single pass efficacy testing. It's available by most of these manufacturers. Some of them have had extensive third-party testing in a single pass with bioaerosols. Some of that testing's been done by the Department of Defense at their weapons lab at Dugway, Utah. When you're testing VOCs, really to get the result, you have to take into consideration what is in the mix in the room. Some of these companies have tested using an office mix recommended by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. So they check to see what the VOC intermediary production might be, which is always a good idea. This particular device does not clean surfaces. This one does, and that one does. All three of these clean surfaces because of the location of their reaction. This one does not clean surface. You could have creation of daughter VOCs, so you need to get from the manufacturer good third-party testing. Many manufacturers have done the testing using the Lawrence Berkeley lab mix to come up with decent third-party test result. One of the other things about these products, as long as you can get the contaminant to them, they do a pretty good job with odor control, engine exhaust, and environmental tobacco smoke. When I say odor control with the engine exhaust, also odor control from any type of organic, even if it's a food odor. If you're designing a food court somewhere, you don't want the odors to move. This is something that has been used in that application. Photocatalyst, just to review as we're getting ready to close, come in several different flavors. Some of them have lights that stand on them and shine onto a matrix. There's an example of that on to the left. You can see where it's energized. It's where you can see the blue light. You can see the one on the right, a different design. So there's a lot more energy distribution because of the location of the lamps. Just be aware, all of this is an engineered solution. So you can tell the difference in first pass efficacy just by getting an engineer and doing the math, but they're not the same, and there is a variation in performance. So if you spec a photocatalyst, be sure you make sure you know which version you were looking at when you looked at the third-party testing. So there are a number of companies that sell their products using ASHRAE 62.1 ventilation rate procedure. That has been revised. I encourage you, if you're going to use these type of devices to help lower the outdoor air, that you really are careful about looking at their third-party test results because there is no one size fits all. When you're starting to look at hydrocarbons in particular, or hydrocarbon chains, it all depends on the molecular weight of the VOC that's going through that you're concerned about. So bottom line is, if you're going to use them for energy reduction, be sure you're aware one size does not fit all. And when you're doing the 62.1 rate ventilation procedures, you need to make all of us that are manufacturers follow the rules and actually do that air testing that's recommended by ASHRAE, where you know what's going on in the room. Conclusions, we'll close rather quickly, and I think we've just about made it through by our timeline. Some of them are passive. In other words, these devices have better first pass effectiveness simply because of their design. They react there in their device in the panel. The energy transfer and the ROS reaction happen in the panel. So with those devices, you have to bring the contaminant to them. They don't go out into space and collect it. So it's a controlled reaction, but it's probably a reaction that's doing stuff that's safe for people because it's not happening out in the occupied space. Had to get a drink of water here. The active ones, the ones like the photohydroionizers, the dry hydrogen machines, and the ionizers, throw energy or throw a stable free radical out into the space. So, for example, the dry hydrogen actually is creating the free radical and putting it in space. The ionizers and the photohydroionizers. Photohydroionizers does both. It throws some of the free radicals it's created out into the space that are stable, but it also throws energy out into the space to create new randomly. And ionizers basically just create energy. Some companies claim that they clump small particles so they can cause small particles to drop out of the air. I think there's some test results that support that. Some of them claim to be able to destroy any kind of biologic that's in the air out there. I would certainly want to be real careful about how that testing was done. Is it a reputable third party test and does it match real life? That being said, I think that we are pretty well through with the presentation. Does anybody have any questions you're aware or that you would like me to ask at this time? And moderator, I think you probably need to take this back over, I guess.
I can. I think with this size of a group, we can allow people to unmute and physically ask questions if you have any. I do see one in the chat right now from Jan Irvin. It says, Dan, a very detailed description presentation for all neophytes like me with all the concerns about oxidation technologies. Why not just design good air filtration and ventilation, even portable HEPA machines? Why even consider oxidation technologies when all the science seems disputed? Beyond very specific occupancies, are there typical uses for this equipment? I've only specified ozone machines for odor control in trash rooms, even with the manufacturer's warnings. Seems like liability here.
All right, I'll speak now as a manufacturer. We've been making a product for 20 years. The reaction occurs in the space. Why are people buying it when you could buy medical grade HEPA? Medical grade HEPAs are not really green. How often do you have to replace them, and what is the return on your investment with the product? HEPA filters are somewhat difficult to retrofit. A lot of times you have to change the blower capacity on the air handling unit if you want to put them in. I'm not saying it's not a good option. I'm simply saying some of these devices have zero static pressure or less than, for example, what our company makes. Static pressure drop is 0.05 at 500 feet per minute, and it only takes 6 inches. So back to your HEPA question, some air handling systems, many air handling systems, in fact, were not designed with blowers to take HEPA, but your point's well made. There's a lot of questions about oxidative technology. Our company has been a source product for a major manufacturer for about 20 years now. So I can only speak for us, but we had to do the testing you're talking about. So we have the test results. One thing our little company did not do was jump into this craziness to try to go get all the federal money for schools. With all the claims out there, our thought was we need to let the smoke settle. And so we're actually doing studies in school classrooms before just speaking as one of the PCO companies. There's no point in us throwing stuff out there without having more answers than we had in the last year, but we're getting them now. One other reason that you might want to use these instead of the old capture technologies. So you've got to start with static pressure you may not be able to deal with. HEPA filters can take up a lot of room. And then last but not least, there's some maintenance issues. Some of the products we've looked at this morning have very few maintenance costs. HEPA has a really high maintenance cost. And once the federal money is spent, these school districts have to maintain them. And it's pretty expensive to maintain medical grade HEPA with a limited budget like school districts have. So I hope that gives you an idea there. The tried and true methods work for sure, but there are good reasons and compelling long-term reasons for some school districts and some owners to look at other solutions. Our technology has been used in hospitals, and we're in 140 of them. And mostly we went in there to help with infection control, in particular with staff. So there are a variety of reasons that hospitals may have bought, anything from getting rid of the odor of a heliport in an OR to helping to reduce their secondary infection level. And this applies kind of straight across the board with these technologies. So I think you should make sure that all of us can give you legitimate third-party testing, and all of us need to confirm that we're not creating things out in the space that are problematic. Our company in the last 20 years has done several hundred case study types using TVOC testing devices, and so we've got quite a backlog and quite a bit of database. you'll just have to check with manufacturer to manufacturer. I think what you'll find out is there's some particular jobs that are almost impossible to retrofit without spending more money than it's worth, I guess. That's strictly up to the engineer that you're hiring as an architect. And see if there was anything else that was associated with that question. It was a good question, and that legacy technologies have been shown to work in the past, but there was a reason all these new technologies have shown up. And a lot of it has to do with sustainability and static pressure drop installation, that type of thing. Anything else?
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any questions.
Hey, Dan, it's Mike over at Stephanie. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Great presentation. I do want to let everyone know that we do have a lot of these. We represent Dan's company here in the Pittsburgh, West Virginia area, and a lot of local hospitals have gone to this technology that we're working with now. So I mean, we have a lot of in-town recorded and graphed results that we could go over with you if you have a question or your engineers have a question. We work with a lot of engineers in this area. So if any of you have a question or your engineers would, you can always send them over to Stephanie Associates, and we work hand in hand with Dan's company. I mean, they're a great company.
Thank you, Mike. Anything else out there, folks? Well, I want to thank everybody for spending the time to go through this. If you have any further questions, if you'll turn them into your AIA representatives or turn them into the folks at Stephanie and Associates, we'd be happy to try to get you an answer. Anything else before we close?
Doesn't look like it.
All right, then we did an
All right.
outstanding job individually and as a group. I hope everyone
I would say
has a great
so.
afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.